The functioning of any economy, and this is always important to investors, depends on the availability of information. The better the information, the more efficiently a market will function. Now, in China, statistics have always been dodgy. I remember, even the former Prime Minister Li Keqiang of China has said as much. He had his own way of measuring the economy because he admitted that the figures he was getting from local authorities couldn't be trusted. So he looked at train traffic, he looked at electricity output, he looked at all these proxies for trying to figure out what the economy was doing. When I was working out there, a lot of finance companies, a lot of analysts had even weirder ways of doing it. Some of them would literally send a spy down to the Shanghai docks and count the number of trucks coming in and out. Someone else looked at admittance figures to Shanghai Disneyland. All of these as kind of proxies for the economy. Others looked at satellite imagery over a number of years, trying to match the claimed figures with the number of lights that were on in different parts, because people simply didn't trust the official figures. And by some estimates, GDP over the years have been overstated by a quarter or a third. But more recently, it's become even more difficult because of the politicization of information at a time when people are really trying to figure out what's going on with the Chinese economy. This has been accompanied by a crackdown against what are called due diligence companies in China. These are companies, a lot of them are Western or Western partnered, and these are companies which provide market information, market research. They do due diligence on potential partners or potential employees, because a lot of companies simply can't. There's so much corruption and there's so much disinformation that it's very hard to know what's going on. And recently, these companies have been subject to quite a severe crackdown, with officials being arrested, files being seized, because the Communist Party really wants only itself to be the source of information in China. And this is quite worrying, because it means that in an economy and a society where information was always problematic, where data was always regarded as primarily an issue of national security, it's become very, very difficult to gauge what on earth is going on at a critical moment when we really need to know that.
Is it because they're trying to inflate it to make themselves look better so they stay in power, or what's the reason?
Essentially, I think they have a 5-year plan, and everything is supposed to stick to the plan. And in this plan, they give a target for GDP growth. And there's a sense of, especially among local authorities, to tell the emperor what he wants to hear, to inflate the figures or to fabricate the figures in order that they appear to be hitting those targets, because local promotions, local rewards are tied to their ability to hit the targets that they've been set. I think that when the leadership sets itself these rigid goals, it almost becomes self-fulfilling. That it doesn't really matter what the economy really does, but they've got to be seen to be hitting these targets. And with the economy at the moment looking quite fragile, there's a lot of skepticism out there about whether even the figures they're now quoting of maybe 4 or 5% growth, A, are achievable, and B, whether the figures they're giving are in any way accurate. The Rhodium Group, which is one well-respected group of analysts, reckon that growth is at best half of what is claimed. Others believe there's no growth at all at the moment.
I'm going to ask this question a few times, I think, throughout this interview, but why China, and why can we assume that the West are not doing this? Didn't the Americans and the British not have the exact same incentives around manipulation of data?
I think manipulation of data goes on in all sorts of societies, but it's far more difficult to do it in a more open society, a more open economy, where you've got more freedom of expression, free press, a functioning legal system, where you can challenge what the authorities are saying, where you can examine more closely the claims that are being made and the data that's being presented. In China, it's much, much more difficult to do that. And it's hardwired in many ways into the DNA of the Communist Party. And there aren't the mechanisms there to really get at the truth. And where the mechanisms have existed, for instance, the due diligence companies, or for a while when the Chinese internet was more open, there were more effective ways or some effective ways at challenging the official narrative. But they've more or less dried up in that respect.
I hope you enjoyed that. It was a clip from our episode with journalist Ian Williams about the economy of China. To watch the full episode, click right here.
What? The economy of China.